Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of For Checking TV. I'm your host, Doug Lackey, and and uh, tonight I'm joined by my co-host, Scotty Porterfield. And obviously, it happened. They got him. Rickard Rakell is indeed a Pittsburgh Penguin. Scotty, what are you thinking? Rickard Rakell to Pittsburgh for Zach Aston Reese, Dom Simone, a second-round pick, and goaltending prospect Callie Klang.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, leading into today, we heard all the rumors about how Pittsburgh was talking with Vancouver, and we heard Besser's name and Connor Garland get thrown around. We also heard Rakell, and it was obvious that Rutherford wasn't going to budge on either of the other two guys. So
Mhm.
Penguins were able to work something out with Anaheim. I was a little surprised to see that they had to throw in both Aston Reese and Simone in order to make that work. At first, the original report came out that it was just a prospect, a roster player, and a pick. So the fact they had to work in two was a little surprising. But at this point, I think Ron Hextall recognized that, hey, I have to make a deal here to strengthen our top six, and he was willing to do whatever it took. And it came with the price of their best defensive forward at Aston Reese. But as long as it bolsters the scoring effort, which I think is going to be the X factor in this team heading into the postseason, then that's all that matters.
Yeah, and I think they just threw Simone in just simply because they were gonna have to put him on waivers anyway. Because after the early morning acquisition of Nathan Beaulieu from Winnipeg, it looks like they're going to go back to the 13 forward 8D set that they used to run with whenever Jim Rutherford was here, where they'll just have two defensemen be healthy scratches. And honestly, they could have done a whole hell of a lot worse. I mean, I think you and I are used to the old regimes where if it's down to the wire, they don't make a deal right away. They end up with remember that year they ended up with Lee Stempniak, and that was like that was it.
Marcel Gotch, yeah.
Yeah, So I'm glad they were able to get this done. Obviously, worth noting the Ducks retained 35% of his contract, which means he's going to be like a $2.47 million cap hit for the rest of the year. Which allows them to stay cap compliant. They're not really messing with that. They don't have to go without players or whatever it may be. And, the exciting thing is that they didn't trade Evan Rodriguez. They didn't trade Kasperi Kapanen. And they've set it up where when all things are clicking, this 12 forward set that they run right now might be one of the better ones they've had since the back-to-back Stanley Cup.
It's definitely got that potential, I'd say, to be there. Obviously, the guys actually that are on the team actually have to make it work, of course. So that's the big X factor there. But I'm honestly looking back on this deal, I was just going back to it. I was a little surprised that of the players that they did trade away. Now, just looking at who the Penguins still have left over, I was surprised that Pedersen wasn't a part of the move. I think that was the one that caught me off guard the most. I figured he was going to be a part of that, but because obviously Burke went on Sportsnet and said that Marino wasn't going to be a part of anything. So I figured, okay, you bring in Beaulieu, you have to figure that a defenseman was getting moved out, but it was just the two forwards. But yeah, I mean, like you said, a forward core, it's definitely got that potential to be one of the better ones. But again, a lot of things have to go right in order for that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And the nice thing about it is if they were going to trade a defenseman, I was worried they were going to fall into the pitfall of they shored up a position of weakness by creating another position of weakness within the blue line. Because I know we were talking about it earlier whenever Besser and Garland became a possibility of them trying to get Mark Pysyk from Buffalo or somebody like that, hoping they'd be able to replace John Marino or Marcus Pedersen. But now we don't need to worry about that. Obviously, he went the rental route, and it's not great. But at the same time, if it gets you to where they want to be, who cares? You know, I
Mhm.
mean, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, they might extend Rickard Rakell. We don't know what's going to happen because they have way too many other important pieces to take care of before they even prioritize the idea of bringing Rickard Rakell back beyond the season. So with that, I mean, really, it's just like you put him with Malkin and just let him just run wild at this point because the best years of his career were on a line with Ryan Getzlaf when Ryan Getzlaf was probably at the height of his game. Um, those back-to-back 30-goal seasons came whenever he was playing with Getzlaf and Andre Kasha.
Mhm.
And, and then Getzlaf fell off a little bit. He just got kind of lost in the shuffle. And, I mean, played with Zegras a little bit here and there this year. But the big thing is he's able to play with an elite center and he's able to play with a big center with size. So I'm not really worried about his game translating to playing on Evgeny Malkin's line. And plus, we also have to keep in mind former teammates Marcus Pettersson, Danton Heinen. There's a lot of familiarity between those three guys, and I
Yeah.
think that's going to make his transition into Pittsburgh much more smoother than it would have been had they gone a different route.
So do you think like potentially if Brian Russ does decide to go somewhere else in free agency that they brought in Rakell's maybe like a safety net of sorts?
I think he could easily be a fallback option because, I mean, obviously we don't know how much he's going to get or how much he's projected to make. It all really depends on how he does in the playoffs. If he has a good playoff, man, forget it. Like he might get more money than Rust. So that's one of those things where he has the pedigree, and if he has a good playoff, he's going to go cash out because his first contract was so team friendly that he has one more chance to cash out before he's slowing down, you know? I mean, really, that's pretty much the same thing for Brian Rust. Like they're very similar players in very similar boats. And, I don't think it's a one or the other thing. I mean, it, there's potential that you don't pay them both, you know?
Yes, yeah. So I want to also run past the Beaulieu trade with you because I mean, when I first saw it, I didn't really understand why. Like it was kind of confusing to me. It's like the Penguins are already loaded up on defensemen to begin with. I didn't think we needed to bring in another one, especially a left-hand one, because we already have plenty of them to go around. You have Matheson, Dumoulin, Pedersen, Ricola if you count him, POJ, and now you have this guy. So I didn't really understand why we felt the need to bring this guy in.
I think they had a trade working earlier in the day where they were going to send Marcus Pettersson somewhere for a top six forward, and then it fell through.
Hmm.
Um, I have who knows? It might come out, it might not, but I mean, I think that they might have had something really cooking with Detroit or Vancouver, and then it fell through because you know they kind of just threw this Rakell trade together at the last possible moment. Because for the longest time, the report was he was going to get traded to Boston and Jake DeBrusk was going to be a part of the return. But instead, this happened. So, something's telling me that like 2:45, Ron Hextall called called Pat Verbeek and was like, "Hey man, what do you got? What are you thinking?" And they just cooked this thing up on the fly because, I mean, although Aston Reese was healthy scratched for a couple games, it is a little bit of a shock to see him go in a sense. Because it's a guy that they valued so highly. I mean, Sullivan and Hextall both love him, but at the same time, that's good for Anaheim because they needed to get one of those defensive-minded forwards back after they traded Nick Delorier to Minnesota. Because like, although Aston Reese isn't nearly as physical as Nick Delorier, when you look at their defensive zone impacts, they're very similar players in terms of defensive zone impacts and penalty killing. So, that was good for the Ducks to find the replacement there. And I'm sure that they'll probably start working on an extension to keep him in Anaheim for a little bit there, because he could be a nice piece to their puzzle for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. So obviously you have to figure that Rakell will probably begin on Gino's line. Who's the guy that gets bumped? If you had to guess, are you bumping Kapanen or Rodriguez, or not Rodriguez? Well, like what do you think the shakeup will be now?
So Rust will go back up with Sid.
Figured.
Rodriguez will go back down. Actually, I'm just gonna throw an entire lineup at you, because it's gonna be the way it shakes out. You're gonna be really surprised. They'll do so. This is like when they're fully healthy. Whenever Zucker comes back, I think we're close to that. I think we're 2 to 3 weeks away from him getting ready to rejoin. You'd have Gensel, Crosby, Rust, Heinen, Malkin, Rakell, Zucker, Carter, Kapanen. And because of how good Evan Rodriguez is defensively, your fourth line would be McGinn, Teddy Bluger, and Evan Rodriguez.
Man.
It's the best of both worlds, man, because you got a fourth line that can shut you down defensively, but also can score goals.
Sounds kind of weird, honest, low key. Just hearing it, obviously, because you're used to hearing Reese's name there, but
yeah, I mean, it's like how after they gave up Tanev, how we had to like adjust because we were so used to Tanev being that guy. Now it's like same deal.
Yeah,
but and then like if they have to shake up the lines right away, I mean, we got to keep in mind Rickard Rakell can play all 3 forward positions. So like if they need a shake up on those lines, I'd expect Danton Heinen to go down to the 4th, Rakell to shuffle to left wing, and Erod go back up into the top 6 with Gino. Or vice versa, maybe Sid bumping Rust down or something like that. But the possibilities are endless. I don't think Kapanen's going to play every game down the stretch here. I think, he's going to become somewhat of like how Carl Hagelin was in 2017, where, if there was a guy that Mike Sullivan was going to pull to like shake up the lineup, like where, would be like, okay, how it was like, it would be like, okay, why the hell is Carl Hagelin scratched for Josh Archibald? And then Josh Archibald would have a big moment and you'd be like, okay, like whatever. Can't really complain with that. So I think that we're looking towards that, where Kapanen may not play every day in the playoffs. And, I mean, they have such great forward depth and defensive depth that Mike Sullivan can really do whatever the hell he wants in terms of matchups. And I think that that's going to make this team a lot harder to play against than what people realize.
Definitely has that potential. Like you said, I think this is going to be a great thing for Rakell. Like you mentioned, he's used to playing with the big center like Malkin. He had it with Getzlaf. The thing about Rakell is like he's not going to he can't create his own scoring opportunities. He needs someone that's going to help him do it. Who better to do it than Evgeny Malkin?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, when you think about it, Danton Heinen's the perfect third wheel for that line. And even if they did end up needing to shuffle it up and put Rodriguez there, it would be the same principle.
Yeah.
Because Heinen and Malkin have that weird thing going. It reminds me of how him and Fedotenko were whenever Fedotenko was in Pittsburgh. You can't explain why. There's really no rhyme nor reason as to why it works, but it's a good little partnership going right now between Danton Heinen and Evgeny Malkin. And yeah.
That is where we stand as of now, I guess. So we'll see just how effective this roster can be, because obviously a lot of other teams made some pretty big moves today. I feel like we got to get into some of these other ones that went down as well.
Yeah. Now, can I just start off by saying I think the Panthers are going to get bounced in one of the first 2 rounds.
Hot take, but I'll entertain it.
What they did reminds me so much of
2013.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like you have a historically bad playoff goalie. You loaded up. You took out some of the guys of your defensive group to accommodate players who are bad. I mean, I'll go as far as
Yeah.
saying that, you shouldn't be giving up all those assets for Ben Sherrod. And Robert Haig is an NHL replacement level defenseman at this point. Um, you know, and honestly, man, like Giroux's going to be great for them, but like at the same time, it's going to be like, how much can he actually do? You know, it's a unique situation because this isn't like a 36 or 37-year-old Jerome McGinley type deal. Like the dude is still kind of young. He can still make things happen. And I think having the lack of pressure that he had in Philly with where they were at, with the fact that they were gearing up towards a true legitimate rebuild, I think he could easily just run wild up on that top line with Barkov. But you just gotta wait and see.
Yeah, there's definitely the potential, I'd say, as far as where he could end up playing, because obviously people have kicked the tires on where he could end up at. But I mean, it's a good, like you said, it comes down to just the fact of, do they have too many cooks in the kitchen there in Florida right now? I mean, let's think of it this way. So right now, if you're the Panthers, you're probably looking at that first line, probably going to end up being Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Giroux.
Yeah.
Then you have Huberdeau, Bennett, and Duclair. Marchment, Lundell, probably Reinhart on the third line. Mm-hmm. Then you have Lomberg with Luostrinen and Hornquist, probably. Uyghur, Ekblad, Forsling, Gudis, and then Sherratt and Montour. Then you have Bob and Knight, essentially. So, I mean,
yeah,
they're definitely, they're definitely loading up right now, and for good reason. I'd say it's going to be, they're not waiting around to see if they think they have a team that can win right now. And I understand, I get that, but a lot of sacrifices were made in order for that to work. So,
yeah, it is. It's interesting. I mean, I think their third line, when they're fully healthy, can be as good as anyone's, though, because it's going to be Marchment, Lindell, and Reinhart. And like, honestly, like, I mean, that's like HBK type line, like that's like, that could be a first line on a lot of NHL teams.
Yeah.
And people would eat it up. They'd love it, So that's a unique situation for them to be in. And like, the big thing is like, they still have Joe Thornton.
Yeah, it'll be a healthy scratch on that team now.
Yeah. I mean, either that or else they pull Luostarinen or Achari. But like, they have a lot of good forward depth options. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, man, I'm worried about Tampa. Like, I'm afraid of Tampa now. Like, they did what they needed to do. In my opinion, the Colton Paul Hagel line is pretty similar to Coleman and Gaudreau.
Yeah, that unit they had. Yeah.
I think that that's going to be big for them, and that they're going to be dominant again, and honestly, that might be enough to take the Panthers out too. And like, that's the other thing that's like weird, is like, they're loading up for something that isn't a sure thing.
Mm-hmm.
There is no clear path out of their division. Because you have Tampa, who has been giving you fits. You've been playing little brother to Tampa for years. I mean, if they get the goaltending situation figured out, Toronto is as good as anyone if they get the goaltending situation figured out, because the forwards are actually clicking right now, with the exception of the Tavares line.
That's one big if right now.
And I mean, Boston could get hot out of nowhere and screw you up big time. It's just a matter of how it's going to go. And, but honestly, man, a lot of the better moves that happened at the deadline, in my opinion, came out west. Like, I think the Minnesota Wild had a wonderful trade deadline
Yeah.
because they got Fleury, and then they used Kakkonen to go get Jake Middleton, who is one of the more underrated defensive defensemen that you'll find in the league. He's most comparable right now to, like, in my opinion, he reminds me a lot of like what Brian Dumoulin was during the first Cup run, where he's unproven, but he has the potential to be a stalwart on your defense for years to come.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't expect that one to kind of pop up there, getting Middleton for Kakkonen, but I mean, tip your hat to Billy Guerin. He made it work, obviously, and they addressed a huge problem they had in that you had to get a goaltender because you could kind of see Cam Talbot wasn't really Cam Talbot wasn't going to be the guy. He's like you said, he's best when he's in a tandem, kind of like what they had, but he can't be the guy that leads you into the playoffs. And you go out and you get Fleury. Now you make that happen. Now it's kind of like, a situation that Fleury's pretty familiar to at this point. Hey, if this guy, doesn't hold up his end of the bargain, I'm ready to step in and do what I need to do. If not, I can wear a hat and ride out as long as I need to. So yeah, Minnesota definitely had a great deadline for sure.
Yeah, they definitely did. The Rangers did good too. I mean, they went out and in terms of just like, their big issue was they didn't have a bottom six. They went out and got themselves an entire third line.
Yeah.
Which, it's going to be helpful for them. I mean, if you throw, like, let's say you throw, like Vetrano with Kopp and Barclay Goodrow, that reminds you a lot of what the Lightning had cooking in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
Like it gives you those type of vibes. And not even that. I mean, Andrew Kopp is pound for pound the best penalty killer in the league. It's like, he's like the Phil Kessel of the PK. He's just like an assassin out there on the penalty kill. And, that's going to be something. I mean, that's something they need help with. I mean, don't get me wrong. They have a lot of good defensive minded forwards, but like, if you can have the best penalty kill guy on your roster, why the hell not?
Yeah, definitely. That was the key was they had all that scoring up top. Obviously you have Panarin, you have Zibanejad, you have Chris Kreider who's playing really well right now, but you need to solidify that bottom six. They did that, obviously, bringing in those guys. You get Frank Vetrano, you bring in a Tyler Mott and a Andrew Kopp. Those are guys that can solidify your bottom six, and they're going to be able to do what they need to do and make your team that much more effective. I'd say that, they're going to, I mean, you have to be realistic here. That could easily be a team that the Pens end up facing in round one. I mean, that's going to be a slugfest. I'm here for it, though. And the other guy they brought in too that people aren't really talking about was Braun. I thought the Justin Braun signing was pretty good for them too. Or the trade.
Yeah, that's a really good trade for them because, I think what they're trying to do is they have Niels Lundqvist up on their roster right now, and he's been doing really, really well as of late. But I think that what they're trying to do is they're trying to find a way to like get a good partner for him, similar to how Keandre Miller has Jacob Trouba.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, the same could go for Braden Schneider as well, trying to get a good partner for Braden Schneider because, like, I mean, you have Lindgren and Fox, Miller and Trouba. You got to find that one last element to go into your third pair with either Niels Lundqvist or Braden Schneider, in my opinion. Because Libor Hayek ain't it. Libor Hayek is not good, like at all. And another team that had a really, really good deadline was Calgary. obviously they got a lot of their business done kind of early in the game, getting Tyler Toffoli from Montreal. But like, I mean, Ryan Carpenter was a good acquisition, and then another really good one was them getting Cal Yarncrook. Um, not only is that a good piece for your top nine, it's also Elias Lindholm's cousin. So like that's going to do wonders for him. That's going to help him along a lot. And I mean, right now, your third line in Calgary is Blake Coleman, Cal Yarncrook, and Andrew Mangiapane. There aren't a lot of teams in the league that can match up with that thing. Like that's good stuff. Also, wildest thing ever. Sean Monahan's the fourth line center on that team. Yeah, they have Backlund with Dubé and Kachuk for some reason. Still,
like we've talked about this before, how Monahan just, he's not really clicking with this system that Daryl Sutter's got going on, obviously. But maybe I don't know if this is because we're in the States and we're out east and we don't pay attention to Calgary as much. That team's a legitimate cup contender.
Oh yeah,
like they're legitimate, and we don't talk about them that much. Like I said, but I mean, you look at how well Gautreau's played. You look at how well this team has adjusted Daryl Sutter. You think about how bad things started out there at first when Sutter got there to where they're at now. Complete 180. You got to give your credit where it's due. They've done a great job turning things around there. That's a legitimate team to keep an eye out for come playoff time for sure.
Yeah, and the big thing is like, I mean, they have four really good lines. I mean, that fourth line can score too. And they're all pretty darn good defensively as well. And that's gonna be a big deal, especially in the Western Conference, because you get matched up against a good bit of those Western Conference teams, and you get those guys that don't really have like legitimate bottom sixes. It's a lot of defensive minded type forwards, similar to what the Penguins were doing for the longest time with the Aston Reese, Bluger, Tanev, or Brock McGinn line. But I'll be real with you, man. Calgary's my favorite to come out of the West. Obviously, Colorado might just steamroll everybody, but if there was one team that's going to knock them off, it's going to be Calgary.
Yeah, well, Sutter said himself, what was the quote about, like, enjoying the 8 days or whatever it was called, whatever he said about it. Yeah, Colorado was a team that had to, make some – that obviously is probably in good shape right now. I don't know what kind of moves they made. They brought in Cogliano and Arturi Lehkonen as well. Yeah. They obviously made the trade for Josh Manson, and they had Nico Sturm as well they brought in. So, they made a couple adjustments, obviously, but those are just minor tweaks. This team needs to make something make some noise in the postseason. I mean, have they been to a conference final yet since they got McKinnon?
No.
I didn't think so. Yeah, I don't think they've been to the conference. So you haven't made it past the second round in quite some time. Probably been longer since McKinnon's been there, if I had to guess. But
yeah,
something's got to come together for this team. I mean, they're too good to keep falling short. It's not like, a Toronto case where it's like, all right, you can see the faults in this team. Like right now, Toronto doesn't have any goaltending. I don't care what they say about this new guy that they keep bringing in, Cali Green, or however you say his name.
That's just all Canadian propaganda. We all know the wheels are going to fall off the bus for that guy at some point.
They are begging and they are praying if this guy does what Jack Campbell did last year, and I don't see that happening at all.
Them signing Harry Sateri was a great thought too, until the Coyotes were like, you know what, we're claiming him off waivers.
Yeah,
that was probably the funniest part of the entire deadline. Honestly, was the fact that the Leafs got screwed over again.
How do we feel about the acquisition of Giordano and Blackwell from Seattle for those guys?
I think it's good for them. I think that, it's It's one of the smarter things they could have done. I mean, they didn't give up a ton of assets, and they're reuniting one of the better defensive pairings in the league that the league has had over the past decade with Giordano and Brody.
That's right. They played together in Calgary. That's right.
Yeah. And Colin Blackwell is going to be good for him. He's another like Evan Rodriguez, Swiss Army knife type player that can play up and down that lineup. And honestly, with how desperate they are, I wouldn't be surprised to see him playing with Nylander and Tavares, trying to just see if they could spark something.
I mean, yeah, you kind of have to try something at this point. I mean,
I don't think Nick Robertson's bad up there, but everybody's going to run that narrative of, oh, he just doesn't fit up there. He's too small or whatever. I mean, look at his brother, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, his brother's one of the best pure snipers in the NHL right now.
Yeah.
It'll come together at some point, but I don't know. What were you going to say?
I was just looking at some of the other teams that made a lot of moves here. Seattle basically just dumped their whole team.
Yeah.
They cleaned house essentially.
They did.
They got
Washington made a good trade though. I think Johan Larsson's going to be good for him. But go ahead.
I was going to talk about Johansson, the other guy that they sent out to Washington.
Yeah.
For Daniel Sprong as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good depth piece for the Capitals. And I mean, I think it's going to be a good thing for Obi and Backstrom because they both came up with him.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the original Caps guys, and I mean, I feel like we've been preaching positional flexibility. I mean, we know Johansson can play all three center spot or all three forward spots, and he can definitely move up and down the lineup for them, given how skilled that roster is. I could see him playing a wing with Sherry and Lars Eller and not looking out of place. Or, I could just see him being there, being a depth piece, just somewhere in the lineup. But with Johan Larsson, him and Garnett Hathaway together on that fourth line, it's gonna be good stuff. I think it's gonna really work. But honestly, man, there were it was a somewhat quiet deadline. It's crazy to think this, but probably the biggest trade that happened today was Rakell going to Pittsburgh.
Today, yeah.
Because everything else got done days before. I mean, big thing was Drew. Yeah, big one was Drew, definitely. But the big thing I want to touch on is the Anaheim Ducks cashed out on all their pending UFAs, man.
100%.
They're setting themselves up for great success here coming up. Drew Hellison's a really good defensive forward or defensive prospect. Played for USA in the Olympics. And I mean, they have so many second round picks now.
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous.
They got a first and 2 second rounders from Boston.
Yeah.
And that for Hampus Lindholm. By the way, how do you feel about that contract?
It's going to age horrifically.
I figured.
Yeah. He wasn't great to begin with, but it's hard, man. You can't give contracts out to guys like that whenever they're older. I mean, same thing's going to happen with Toronto with Morgan Riley.
Although I think Riley's got more of an upside than Hampus Lindholm does. In my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. Because Hampus Lindholm's a more of a defensive defenseman type guy. He plays a very rugged style. He reminds me a good bit of Marc-Edouard Vlasic, where he plays that style where potentially 2 or 3 years into this contract, the wheels are going to fall off the bus completely, and they're going to have no choice but to buy him out before that contract ends.
And also, they dumped off the Ryan Kessler contract too.
Yeah, that's big for them.
Vegas for Evgeny Dadonov. So that was another big one they could do. Where does Vegas go for at this point? Like, what is like? I mean, they've got a lot of things going on with that team right now. That was the only trade they made at the deadline, and I feel like they had a lot more needs, obviously, but they just couldn't do anything because the team is so they're in such a tough situation right now that like half the team's hurt.
I think they were clearing space to potentially activate somebody off of LTIR because the entire idea was they were going to have Mark Stone on LTIR the entire time, and they were going to have Dadanov as a depth piece in the playoffs. But then they started losing a bunch of games, realizing that Dadanov couldn't replace Stone in the lineup, and they had no choice other than to make this move. But I'll tell you what, though, good on the Ducks for being able to recoup a second just out of pure desperation on Vegas's end. I mean, they're loaded. They have 8 second-round picks in the next 3 drafts.
I think you can make a case for them. I think them and Montreal probably had the 2 best deadlines out of anybody.
Yeah, Montreal did really, really good. Because nobody on this wonderful earth should have given up that many assets for Ben Sherratt.
Right.
But they did, you know. I'll tell you what, a very underrated one was getting a second-round pick out of Brett Kulak.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, that is crazy. Because, like, he was like their number 6 guy on their defensive group. And, I mean, you know, they did pretty good with Lehkonen. Could they have gotten more? Probably. I know they were trying to get a first for him because of how good he was for them down the stretch. But, I mean, you know, you recouped 2 first-round picks whenever it seemed like you weren't, whenever they went into the year having no first-round picks after they traded for Christian Dvorak, overreacting over the Kotkaniemi offer sheet. I mean, I think that that's good for them. You know, and I mean, honestly, man, like, even though the Canadians have been playing good of late, they're still going to end up with probably a top 3 pick in the draft. You know, and I mean, getting one of Shane Wright, Logan Collier, Matthew Savoy for this team is going to do wonders for them because they have good pieces, but they don't have that true franchise breaking number 1 center yet. I think Nick Suzuki's a great number 2. But they need to find that number 1 center to put them over the top. You know?
Not to mention that group seems to really be buying into whatever Marty St. Louis is trying to tell them.
Yeah.
And Cole Caulfield is more than emerged to like he's going to be a legitimate asset for that team for a while now.
Yeah. Cole Caulfield bought into like the Short King's Bible on how to be a baller. Like, that's really where we're at. Which is, I mean, it's good for them. And the interesting thing about it is they haven't played left wing.
Yeah.
They're not playing the right side. They have him on that one-timer side where he's able to just rip it, similar to how Ovi and Line do, you know? I really, really like that. I really, really like that for them. I thought they would have tried to move Yoel Armia, though, but that might be a summer trade. That might be a draft trade.
Yeah, that's one of like they're in a situation now where they don't need to get rid of this guy at the deadline. You know, that one is one that you can put off and wait on. It'll probably still work.
Plus, they're going to cash out on Jeff Petrie in the summer. Like, somebody's going to move the moon and the freaking stars for Jeff Petrie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it might be Pittsburgh. You don't know. You don't know what the future holds for Chris Letang. I'm not speaking that into existence, so I don't want that to happen. But definitely. you know, and I got to say, the meme of the day was the New York Islanders doing absolutely nothing at all except for extending Cal Clutterbuck and
Which
Zach Parise.
is not what you need to do at all. I say the
You know,
two, them and Buffalo were probably the two worst teams at the deadline this year.
well, yeah, Buffalo could have cashed out on some pieces they had.
Yeah.
Like somebody could have had Mark Pysick for cheap if they wanted to trade him. Not for cheap, but like they could have recouped like a second round pick for Mark Pysick if they wanted to.
Yeah, for sure. We
You
didn't
know,
touch on another guy that got moved too was Max Domi getting out of Columbus and
yeah,
getting to Carolina. That was a 3-team deal.
that is it's a good trade for Carolina. I mean, Carolina is slowly becoming the most irritating team to play against. Um, you know, and in terms of that being the goal, Max Domi just put him over the freaking top. Because you have D'Angelo, you have Jesper Fost, you have Derek Stepan, Domi now, Vince Trocheck, low key. Vince Trocheck's an asshole in terms of being on the ice and playing against. I like same with Kotkaniemi. Like it's the guys you don't expect at all. And I mean Nino Niederreiter also very difficult to play against, kind of a pest out there. But they're in a good spot. They're probably the best team in the Metro right now. With Pittsburgh being a close second. But that, I mean, obviously that all could flip flop. I mean, who knows what's going to happen until we actually see Rickard Rakell play.
I say let's get into that because you think Pittsburgh's the second best team in the Metro? You're putting them above New York right now?
Yeah, at least for right now, because the only thing that's gotten them to where they're at is Igor Shesterkin and Chris Kreider and Adam Fox. It's literally a 3-man band. But if all these additions work well for them and they do okay, and they have a good resurgence down the stretch, things might get a little scary.
I don't think you're giving Breadman's Zibanejad their due diligence. Those guys are playing really well right now.
That's true. That's very true.
I think those guys are doing what they need to do. I can kind of see your point with the rest of the team, obviously. I mean, no one's really checking out for Greg McKegg.
But it's hard because it's like outside of the top 6, there's nothing.
But now they brought in these new guys. And I think that might be all they need to sort of,
Well, yeah, they're no longer going to be icing Kevin Rooney as a third line center,
right?
Which is key. Like they had some decent pieces. I mean, Heedle's good, Julian Gautier's good, and if you're able to mix and match them in with these new guys, you might have something really good cooking up in the lab there. And I mean, they have really good defensive depth. I mean, most of their best prospects that they have in the AHL right now are defensemen, and they are all almost NHL ready, with the exception of Matthew Robertson. So, I mean, there's that, but I don't know. It's a toss up. I mean, obviously, this is something we can probably revisit next month, and there's a lot clearer picture on it. But like, the Pens and the Rangers are a coin flip as it sits right now. And I mean, the Caps, they know how to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
What happens beyond that point is a mystery.
Yeah. They can go left, they can go right with them.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like that meme where it's like they could go straight or they make the wide left turn or the wide right turn. Yeah, it's like that. But honestly, it's interesting. I think and the big thing is like down the stretch, like they're gonna have these games like the Islanders are playing a lot better. right now. Columbus is a trap game. I mean, who knows what's going to happen when you walk into a random night when you're playing the Canadians. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of trap games on some of these teams' schedules for the rest of the year, and that might be the difference in determining who's who in the division. But like right now, the Rangers and the Penguins are both only 3 points out of the top spot in the Metro. That is still very much up for grabs. If one of those two teams get hot, like we're talking like it's going to be a freaking arms race for who gets that division crown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. I think you can make a case that's probably the most of the competitive division in hockey. Obviously, like you said, there's not much breathing room for anyone. I think this is going to be a fun few games, and it's like you said, it's those games where you think, okay, they're supposed to walk away with a W here, that might end up tripping some of these teams up heading down the stretch here. I'm pretty sure the Rangers have a game in hand on the Penguins too, I believe. So that's another thing I think they have to factor in. But
no, they're all even. The Hurricanes have a game in hand though on both.
Okay.
So
So
that could be something.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt.
I mean, what else do you think? What else you got?
And we got it all. It was
Yeah.
a very interesting deadline. Now it's a sprint to the finish.
Yeah, exactly. Great day though. Rickard Rakell is a Penguin, and that's pretty much it. All right, guys, this has been another episode of Forechecking TV. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Forechecking TV and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you guys and good night.